What team are you on?
Your team.
Oh, nice.
I shot you armed!
Alright everybody, today I'm going to be talking about Amtgard. Now, if you are pretty observant, you will immediately be able to tell that Amtgard plays pretty differently from Dagger here in a couple of different ways. Today I'm going to be going over those ways and give you kind of what it's like to be an Amtgard player, just a day in the life of an Amtgard player. To put a little history to it, now, this is all speculation, this isn't completely accurate history. I've heard this through, word of mouth alone. I don't really think there's a history book on Amtgard itself, but supposedly how it went down was the creator of Amtgard got kicked out of Dagger here, went down to Texas, created his own game called Amtgard, then proceeded to get kicked out of Amtgard once it grew big enough. Don't let that, rub you the wrong way. It actually is a pretty good sign that Amtgard is a very cohesive group and they really want to keep themselves together despite what their creator may, want or not. Amtgard lends itself to this sort of sword and sorcery combat. Now, that is exactly what it sounds like. Basically, Amtgard is mostly fantasy based. Dagger here has fantasy elements employed, so maybe certain people's character personas are fantastical. The combat has basically no fantasy in it. It is all physical combat, whereas Amtgard really employs a lot of the mythical fantasy ideas into the combat, using magic, using abilities and powers, even having classes and weapon and armor restrictions for those classes. I actually went over the rulebook in an earlier video, but decided not to go through with it as I burned out about halfway through the video. It's very extensive. The rulebook is big, and I do recommend you read it. It's actually great for reading. If you're bored, you want to learn more, you just sit down, you read the rulebook. It's not a boring read really, even though it is a rulebook. However, it's not something you want to make a 20-30 minute video on. To circumvent that, I will be talking about the big differences from Dagger here that Amtgard has. So the combat, the classes, and sort of even how the weapons are constructed. There's a couple different things, but most of it will be covered with the big differences in the combat and the classes. Interestingly enough, the combat mechanics on a basic level for Amtgard are not actually very different from those of Dagger here. 2 limbs or 1 torso shot, both equal death. Getting hit in the limb, you go down on the leg or hold the arm behind your back, etc. All of those really leave unchanged from game to game, which is kind of an easy way to see the beginnings of Amtgard and how it really built off of Dagger here in many ways. The biggest difference in the most basic way is the sufficient force rule. Now, Dagger here's sufficient force rule basically states that it is on the person taking a hit to say whether it was hard enough for it to be considered a valid shot. In Amtgard, it's still on the person receiving a hit to say if the hit was valid, to say if the hit actually connected with their body. However, a hit only needs to be one thing in order to be considered valid. It needs to be audible. So audible basically means you can hear it. So the way they describe it in the rulebook is an audible pop means that a hit is valid. The weapons also are pretty different. Dagger here had and still does have minimum weight requirements for their regular swords and other weapons, so weapons are sometimes built off of weight requirements, whereas in Amtgard there is no weight necessity. There's no weight goal you have to hit for your weapons. Your weapons can be mere ounces and they're still valid as long as they're striking legal. So because of this, the combat in Amtgard is sometimes a lot quicker paced. The weapons are moving faster, they're much lighter, people can throw shots at an increased rate to those of Dagger here. The way I like to think of it personally is in Dagger here you see a lot of static movement, so you see people who are hunkering down, who are making shield walls, making lines, making, puncture wounds in those walls, whereas in Amtgard you see a lot of running around. It's sometimes hard to be taken seriously when it does look kind of, in a way, to some people childish. There's spells, there's magic, everyone's running around, but it's incredible fun. I absolutely love it. The next big difference comes in the classes section. So where in Dagger here you can pick up any weapon, you know, any kit, walk out on the field and be able to use it. In Amtgard, you actually have to build off of a class. If you want to play a monk, if you want to play a warrior, a barbarian, a wizard, a healer, they all give you beginnings. The most basic of them are the martial classes. What martial means is it's more physical based. So they have more combat attributes. Whereas the magic classes are exactly what it sounds like, magic. The class that I used to always play as a martial class was the monk class. And the reason I played it was because one of the benefits the monks get at first level is being able to ignore all verbal spells. So spells come in usually two different ways. One way is with a spell ball, so a physical ball that is thrown at you that does something when it connects, or verbal. Now verbal means spoken. So pointing at someone and speaking an incantation, that person then needs to follow the applied condition of the incantation. So there are spells to shove people back so they can't come a certain amount of, they can't come in a certain amount of distance to you for so long. There are some that freeze people or suppress them so they can't use their own powers. There are so many different spells, and each class is really attenuated to doing different things with those spells. Honestly, I think the best thing you can do is just sit down and read the rule book. If you're interested in playing Amtgard, if you're interested in these kind of things, and you want to know more, literally just spend a night reading it. It's not like horrible. I actually sometimes will read it on, the off chance that I need to learn something, or if I'm bored and I want to just make sure I remember everything correctly. It can really help on the battlefield. I'm going to leave you with a bit of footage that is from a couple Amtgard games, and hopefully that'll give you an idea of kind of what it's like to be in an Amtgard game.
Force ball. Force ball. Force ball. Okay. Team Alistair or Rob, it doesn't really matter. Force ball. Team Alistair! Flame of Storm is mine to evoke, Flame of Storm is mine to evoke, Flame of Storm is mine to evoke. I'll let you be. Are you still Alistair?
Who's alive?
Ah! Tangled! I missed! Hey, Alistair, left side. Okay. What team are you on?
Your team.
Oh, nice.
I got him!
Is anyone not Team Alistair?
Yes.
No! Alright, I'm untangled. Team Alistair is disbanded!